Think you know everything about the groundbreaking 1974 romance Claudine? From a tragic actress who died during filming to a young Laurence Fishburne being fired, Hollywood blacklist secrets, and a garbage man role that gave James Earl Jones more satisfaction than voicing Darth Vader, this beloved film hides some truly bizarre production stories. Prepare to discover the shocking casting changes, unusual soundtrack decisions, and behind-the-scenes drama that nearly derailed one of cinema's most authentic love stories. Fact 1. A dying star's final gift. When filming began on Claudine in 1973, the lead role was supposed to belong to Diana Sands, a talented actress who had already made her mark on Broadway and in Hollywood, with memorable performances in plays like A Raisin in the Sun. Sands was excited to take on this challenging role of a single mother navigating the welfare system in Harlem, seeing it as an opportunity to portray a complex and realistic black woman on screen during a time when such roles were rare. However, just 1 week into filming, something went terribly wrong. Sands began experiencing severe pain that made it impossible for her to continue working, and when doctors examined her, they discovered she had developed pancreatic cancer, one of the most aggressive and deadly forms of the disease. The news was devastating not only for Sands personally, but also for the entire production team who had built the movie around her involvement. What happened next became one of Hollywood's most touching stories of friendship and professional dedication. Even though Sands was facing her own mortality and dealing with the shock of her diagnosis, she didn't simply walk away from the project. Instead, she picked up the phone and called her longtime friend, Diane Carroll, who was already an established star from her groundbreaking television show Julia. During that emotional conversation, Sands insisted that Carroll should take over the role of Claudine, telling her friend that she was the right person to bring this important character to life. Sands used whatever influence she had left to convince the film's producers to hire Carroll as her replacement. Tragically, Diana Sands died on September 21, 1973, just weeks after making that crucial phone call. Her final act as a professional was ensuring that this meaningful story about black family life would continue with someone she trusted completely to honor the role's importance and complexity. Fact 2. The blacklisted director's comeback. The director behind Claudine, John Barry, had one of the most unusual career paths in Hollywood history, spending more than 2 decades in forced exile before returning to make this film. Barry started his career in the 1940s working with major studios like Paramount and directing successful films, but his life took a dramatic turn during the McCarthy era when the government began investigating supposed communist influence in Hollywood. In 1950, Barry made the decision to direct a documentary called The Hollywood 10, which supported a group of writers and directors who had been jailed for refusing to cooperate with congressional investigators looking for communists in the film industry. This decision would completely change the course of his life, because soon after the documentary was completed, Barry himself was named as a communist sympathizer by Edward Dmytryk, a fellow director who had decided to cooperate with investigators in order to save his own career. Rather than face the House Un-American Activities Committee and potentially go to prison, Barry made the difficult choice to leave the United States entirely. He fled to France in the early 1950s, where he would spend the next 20-plus years building a new life and career. During his time in exile, Barry directed films in France and worked in London theaters, but he was completely shut out of the American film industry that had once welcomed him. When Barry finally returned to the United States in the early 1970s, the political climate had changed enough that he could work again, and Claudine became his first American film in more than 2 decades. The irony wasn't lost on anyone that this blacklisted director, who had been punished for his political beliefs, was now making a film about another group of Americans who were marginalized by the system. For Barry, directing Claudine represented not just a professional comeback, but a chance to tell meaningful stories about people who had been overlooked by mainstream Hollywood. Fact 3. James Earl Jones's most satisfying role. James Earl Jones is one of the most recognizable voices in entertainment history, known around the world for bringing life to characters like Darth Vader in the Star Wars films and Mufasa in Disney's The Lion King, but surprisingly, he has said that playing garbage collector Rupert Marshall in Claudine gave him more personal satisfaction than any of his other film roles. This statement is particularly remarkable when you consider that Jones went on to become one of the most celebrated actors of his generation, with a career spanning theater, television, and movies that made him a household name. At the time Claudine was made in 1974, Jones was still establishing himself as a serious film actor and the early 1970s were a challenging period for classically trained black actors like him. The film industry was dominated by what were called blaxploitation movies, which often featured exaggerated characters and storylines that didn't appeal to Jones's theatrical sensibilities. He described himself as a farm boy from Mississippi, whose deep, resonant voice and stage presence didn't fit well with the jive-talking characters that were popular in many films of that era. What made the role of Roop so special for Jones was the opportunity to play a genuinely decent, hard-working man who was trying to do right by the woman he loved and her 6 children. Instead of adopting the flashy persona of the typical 1970s movie character, Jones drew on his own rural background to create Roop as a transplanted countryman who understood the value of courtship and treating a woman with respect. The role allowed him to showcase his natural charm and warmth in a way that felt authentic and meaningful to him personally. Years later, Jones would continue to cite this performance as one of his favorites, even after achieving international fame through his iconic voice work. Fact 4. Young Laurence Fishburne got fired. Before he became famous for roles in movies like The Matrix and Boys in the Hood, a very young Laurence Fishburne was actually cast in Claudine as one of Claudine's children, but his involvement in the film came to an abrupt end, due to circumstances completely beyond his control. When the original production began in 1973, Fishburne was just a teenager trying to break into acting, and landing a role in what was expected to be an important film about black family life seemed like a great opportunity for the aspiring actor. However, when Diana Sands became seriously ill with cancer and had to leave the production after only 1 week of filming, the entire movie had to be shut down and completely restructured. The producers faced a massive challenge because they had built the story and the family dynamics around Sands as the mother figure. And when Diahann Carroll stepped in to replace her, everything about the production had to be reconsidered and reworked. During this restructuring process, the filmmakers made the difficult decision to let go of several of the child actors who had been cast to play Claudine's children, including the young Fishburne. This wasn't because of any problems with his performance or behavior, but rather because the new version of the film required a different approach to casting the family members, and the producers wanted to start fresh with actors who would work well with Carroll's interpretation of the mother character. At the time, losing this role must have been disappointing for Fishburne, who was just starting his career and probably saw Claudine as a stepping stone to bigger opportunities. Of course, he would go on to have one of the most successful acting careers in Hollywood, but it's interesting to think about how different film history might have been if he had remained in the cast and appeared alongside James Earl Jones and Diahann Carroll in this groundbreaking movie. Fact 5. The director thought Carroll was too sophisticated. When Diahann Carroll was approached to replace Diana Sands as the lead in Claudine, director John Barry had serious doubts about whether she could pull off the role, believing that Carroll was simply too polished and glamorous to convincingly portray a struggling welfare mother living in a rundown Harlem apartment. This concern wasn't entirely unreasonable, considering that Carroll was already a major star known for her elegance and sophistication, having broken barriers as the first black woman to star in her own television series with Julia, where she played a middle-class nurse who was always impeccably dressed and well-spoken. Barry's hesitation reflected a common problem in Hollywood at the time, where successful black actresses were often typecast in roles that emphasized their beauty and refinement, making it difficult for audiences to see them as ordinary working-class women facing real economic hardships. Carroll's public image was that of a glamorous entertainer and trailblazing television star, which seemed to conflict with the gritty, authentic portrayal that Claudine required of a mother working as a maid while hiding her income from welfare investigators. However, Carroll had a powerful argument that eventually convinced Barry to give her the chance. She pointed out that she was actually from the Bronx and had grown up around women exactly like Claudine, so she understood the character from personal experience rather than just from reading a script. Carroll insisted that she knew she could play this part as well as anyone else, drawing on her own background and observations of the strong women in her community who were doing whatever it took to survive and support their families. Her confidence and determination ultimately won over the director, and Carroll proved that she could completely transform herself for the role, delivering a performance that was so authentic and powerful that it earned her an Academy Award nomination and showed audiences a completely different side of her acting abilities. Fact 6. Carroll wore no makeup throughout filming. Diahann Carroll made the radical decision to film Claudine without wearing any makeup at all, a choice that was almost unheard of for a major Hollywood actress in the 1970s, especially one who was known for her stunning beauty and polished appearance. This wasn't just a small adjustment to her usual look, but a complete transformation that required her to abandon everything that had made her a glamorous star on television and in nightclub performances. Carol went even further in her efforts to deglamorize herself by specifically choosing hairstyles that were designed to be unflattering and emphasize features that she normally would have tried to minimize. She deliberately wore her hair brushed straight back in simple styles that highlighted her square forehead, which was something she had always been self-conscious about and had learned to camouflage through careful styling and lighting during her career as an entertainer. The actress also selected costumes and dresses that didn't hide what she called her knock knees, another physical feature that professional stylists had always helped her work around during her television appearances and photo shoots. Instead of the form-fitting, elegant clothing that audiences were used to seeing her wear, Carol chose loose, worn-looking outfits that reflected the financial struggles of a single mother who couldn't afford to worry about fashion or appearance. This dramatic physical transformation was crucial to making her performance believable, because audiences needed to see Carol as Claudine, the struggling welfare recipient, not as the sophisticated television star they knew from Julia. Years later, Carol would describe this role as representing a gritty, real, honest black woman working her tail off. And her willingness to completely abandon her glamorous image was essential to creating that authenticity. The fact that she still looked naturally beautiful even without any makeup or flattering styling only made her commitment to the character more impressive and showed her serious dedication to the craft of acting. Fact 7. Third World Cinema's first and last hit. Claudine holds the unique distinction of being both the first major success and essentially the final project for Third World Cinema Corporation, a groundbreaking production company that was founded with the ambitious goal of creating more authentic and meaningful films about Black and Latino communities. The company was established in 1971 by a group of prominent actors and writers, including Ossie Davis, Diana Sands, James Earl Jones, Rita Moreno, and producer Hannah Weinstein, who wanted to move beyond the stereotypical portrayals that were common in Hollywood at the time. Third World Cinema Corporation was designed to be much more than just another film production company, as it also included a comprehensive training program that was specifically created to help people of color gain technical skills and enter behind-the-scenes jobs in the film industry that had traditionally been closed to them. The company struck deals with labor unions to help their students gain membership, and worked to place graduates in positions as camera operators, editors, sound technicians, and other crucial roles that would give minority professionals a real foothold in Hollywood. When Claudine was released in 1974, it proved that the Third World Cinema approach could work both artistically and commercially, earning $6 million at the box office and receiving critical acclaim along with Academy Award recognition for Diahann Carroll's performance. The film also demonstrated the company's commitment to inclusive hiring, with 28 of the 37 production jobs filled by Black or Latino professionals, a level of diversity that was almost unheard of in Hollywood at that time. However, this success came at exactly the wrong moment politically, because President Nixon's re-election led to major cuts in the social programs that Third World Cinema Corporation depended on for funding. Without the government support that had made their training programs and production activities possible, the company was forced to fold despite having proven that their model could create both meaningful entertainment and real opportunities for underrepresented communities in the film industry. Fact 8. The Joy detergent bubble bath scene. One of the most memorable and touching scenes in Claudine features a surprisingly humble product that most viewers probably didn't think twice about, but which perfectly captured the realistic, working-class romance at the heart of the film. When James Earl Jones's character Roop takes Claudine back to his apartment for their first real date, he wants to help her relax after a long day of working as a housekeeper and dealing with her 6 demanding children, so he decides to run her a hot bath to help ease her exhaustion. However, instead of using expensive bath salts or luxury bubble bath products that you might see in a typical Hollywood romance, Roop creates the bubbles by pouring Joy dishwashing detergent into the bathtub, which was exactly the kind of practical solution that a real garbage collector living on a modest income would actually use. This small detail wasn't just a random choice by the filmmakers, but rather a carefully considered decision that helped establish the authentic, down-to-earth nature of the relationship between these two characters who were both working hard to make ends meet. The scene becomes even more tender when Claudine, who is completely worn out from her daily struggles, actually falls asleep in the bathtub while Roop is preparing a simple dinner for them. Instead of waking her up or being frustrated by this turn of events, Roop quietly orders fried chicken and lets her rest, showing the kind of patient understanding and genuine care that made their love story feel real and believable to audiences. This moment perfectly captured the film's approach to depicting romance between working-class black characters, showing that love and tenderness didn't require expensive gestures or fancy settings, but could be found in simple acts of kindness and consideration. The Joy detergent bubble bath became a symbol of how the movie found beauty and romance in the everyday realities of people who were often overlooked by mainstream Hollywood films. Fact 9. Cicely Tyson also turned down the role. Before Diana Sands was eventually cast as the original Claudine, the producers had actually approached Cicely Tyson to play the title role, but she made the decision to pass on what would have been a significant opportunity in her career. At the time the film was being developed in the early 1970s, Tyson was already establishing herself as one of the most respected black actresses in Hollywood, having gained attention for her powerful performances in both television and film projects that dealt with serious social issues. Tyson had built her reputation by carefully choosing roles that she felt portrayed black women with dignity and complexity, often taking on characters who faced difficult circumstances but maintained their strength and integrity throughout their struggles. She was particularly known for being selective about the parts she accepted, turning down roles that she felt reinforced negative stereotypes or didn't meet her standards for how black people should be represented on screen. The reasons why Tyson declined the role of Claudine aren't completely clear from the historical record, but it's possible that she had concerns about some aspect of the story or the character that didn't align with her vision for the kinds of parts she wanted to play. It's also worth noting that in the early 1970s, there were limited opportunities for serious black actresses, so turning down a major role was always a risky decision that could potentially affect future career prospects. Whatever her reasons for declining, Tyson's choice opened the door for Diana Sands to take on the role, which ultimately led to Diahann Carroll's involvement when Sands became ill. It's fascinating to imagine how different the film might have been with Tyson in the lead role, given her distinctive acting style and the way she approached portraying strong black women on screen, but her decision not to participate became an important part of the chain of events that shaped the final version of Claudine. Fact 10. The mysterious bus theater continuity error. Eagle-eyed viewers who watch the opening sequence of Claudine carefully will notice a glaring continuity mistake that somehow made it past the editing process and into the final version of the film. During the scene where Claudine is riding the bus with her friends on her way to work as a housekeeper, the camera shows them passing by the new Marble Hill movie theater not once, but twice during what should be a single, continuous journey through the neighborhood. This kind of continuity error is exactly the type of mistake that film editors and directors usually catch during post-production, especially since it involves such a distinctive and easily recognizable landmark that would be obvious to anyone familiar with the area where the movie was filmed. The new Marble Hill Theater was a real location in the Bronx, and its appearance twice in the same bus ride creates a confusing geography that suggests either the bus was traveling in a circle or the filmmakers accidentally used footage from two different takes without realizing the problem. What makes this mistake particularly interesting is that Claudine was generally praised for its authentic portrayal of New York City locations, with much of the film shot on real streets in Harlem and other neighborhoods that gave the movie a genuine sense of place that many Hollywood productions lacked. The filmmakers went to great lengths to capture the actual environment where characters like Claudine would have lived and worked, making this obvious geographical error stand out even more. It's possible that this continuity mistake happened during the chaotic period when the film had to be completely restructured after Diana Sands became ill, and the editing team may have been working with limited footage or under time pressure to complete the movie. Alternatively, the error might have been noticed but considered minor enough that it wasn't worth the time and expense to fix, especially since most audience members probably wouldn't catch the mistake during a normal viewing of the film. Fact 11. Curtis Mayfield's soundtrack gamble. When Gladys Knight and the Pips agreed to work with Curtis Mayfield on the Claudine soundtrack, they were taking a significant career risk that could have derailed the momentum they had been building in the mainstream pop music world. Just before the Claudine project came along in 1974, the group had achieved remarkable crossover success with hit songs like Neither One of Us and Midnight Train to Georgia, which had helped them break out of being seen as just an R&B act and gain acceptance with white pop audiences who might not have paid attention to them otherwise. This crossover appeal was incredibly valuable in the music industry of the early 1970s, because it meant much larger record sales, more radio play, and opportunities to perform for broader audiences that could significantly increase the group's earning potential. The songs that had made them successful were written by Jim Weatherly and had a polished, accessible sound that worked well on both R, B, and pop radio stations, giving Gladys Knight and the Pips a proven formula for continued commercial success. However, working with Curtis Mayfield represented a completely different musical direction, because he was known for creating more socially conscious, political music that dealt with serious topics like poverty, racism, and urban struggles. His approach to songwriting was often more complex and challenging than the radio-friendly pop songs that had been making Gladys Knight and the Pips famous, and there was no guarantee that audiences who had embraced their recent hits would be interested in this new style. The gamble ultimately paid off brilliantly, because Mayfield created songs for the Claudine soundtrack that perfectly matched the group's vocal strengths, while also supporting the film's themes about welfare, family, and survival in urban America. The soundtrack's lead single, On and On, became a top 5 pop hit, proving that Gladys Knight and the Pips could successfully navigate different musical styles without losing their audience appeal. Fact 12. The Communist Documentary Connection. The specific reason John Barry ended up on Hollywood's blacklist creates one of the most ironic stories in film history, because he was punished for making a documentary that defended the very group of people who would later be known as some of the entertainment industry's most celebrated martyrs. In 1950, Barry agreed to direct a short documentary called The Hollywood 10, which was created to support a group of writers and directors who had been jailed for refusing to cooperate with the House Un-American Activities Committee during their investigation into supposed communist influence in the movie business. The Hollywood 10 were screenwriters and directors who had been called to testify before Congress about their political beliefs and associations, but they refused to answer questions about whether they were members of the Communist Party, citing their First Amendment rights to free speech and free association. When they wouldn't cooperate with the investigation, they were charged with contempt of Congress and sent to prison, becoming symbols of resistance to what many people saw as government overreach and political persecution. Barry's documentary was designed to show these men as principled individuals who were standing up for constitutional rights rather than dangerous subversives who posed a threat to American security. However, this supportive stance made Barry himself a target for investigators who were looking for anyone connected to communist activities or sympathies in Hollywood. The situation became even more complicated when Edward Dmytryk, who was actually one of the original Hollywood 10, decided to cooperate with investigators after serving his prison sentence in order to restart his career. Dmytryk provided names of people he claimed were communists, and John Barry was one of the 26 individuals he identified during his testimony. This betrayal by someone Barry had tried to defend in his documentary led directly to Barry's blacklisting and his decision to flee to France, where he would spend the next 2 decades of his life in exile. Fact 13. Ivan Dixon's secret cameo. Hidden in the climactic final scene of Claudine is an unexpected appearance by Ivan Dixon, the actor who was best known to television audiences as Sergeant James Kinchlow on the popular sitcom Hogan's Heroes, but his presence in the film went completely uncredited and has remained one of the movie's best-kept secrets for decades. Dixon appears during the chaotic wedding scene at the end of the movie, when Claudine's eldest son Charles comes running into the apartment with police chasing after him because of his involvement in a political demonstration. As the scene unfolds and Claudine makes the decision to support her son by climbing into the police truck with him, a crowd of neighborhood residents begins to follow along to show their solidarity with the family. If you look carefully at this crowd, you can spot Dixon wearing a distinctive red shirt, walking among the other community members who are accompanying Claudine and her family during this moment of crisis and unity. What makes Dixon's appearance particularly interesting is that he was a longtime personal friend of both Diane Carroll and James Earl Jones, which explains how he ended up being part of this scene even though he had no official role in the production. During the 1970s, Dixon was expanding his career beyond acting to include directing, and he had become involved with projects that dealt with serious social and political issues affecting the Black community, making his participation in Claudine's final scene especially meaningful. Dixon's cameo was filmed during the final weeks of production when additional scenes were being shot to complete the movie, and his presence adds an extra layer of authenticity to the community support that Claudine receives during her family's moment of need. The fact that he appears uncredited suggests that his participation was probably a spontaneous decision rather than a planned casting choice, making it a genuine surprise for viewers who happen to recognize his familiar face in the crowd. Fact 14. The cable TV Oscar campaign. Producer Hannah Weinstein made entertainment industry history in December 1974 when she decided to promote Claudine for Academy Award consideration by screening it on cable television, creating what industry publications described as a completely new approach to Oscar campaigning that had never been tried before. At that time, cable television was still a relatively new technology that most people didn't have access to, and the idea of using it as a promotional tool for major motion pictures was considered revolutionary and somewhat risky. Weinstein arranged for Claudine to be shown on Z Channel, which was one of the first premium cable networks, and served primarily the Los Angeles area where most Academy Award voters lived and worked. The film was screened for one full week, from December 20th through December 26, 1974, giving Academy members multiple opportunities to watch it from the comfort of their own homes, rather than having to attend special industry screenings or theater showings. What made Weinstein's strategy particularly forward-thinking was her prediction about how cable television would change the entire Oscar campaign process in the future. She told industry reporters that she believed cable would eventually become the great equalizer in future Oscar balloting, suggesting that this technology would give smaller films and independent productions a better chance to compete against big studio movies that had larger promotional budgets and more traditional marketing campaigns. This prediction turned out to be remarkably accurate, as home video and cable television would eventually become crucial tools for Oscar campaigns, allowing voters to view films multiple times and making it easier for movies with limited theatrical releases to gain recognition from Academy members. Weinstein's innovative approach with Claudine helped establish a precedent that would later become standard practice in the film industry, and her successful use of cable television to promote Diahann Carroll's eventually Oscar-nominated performance demonstrated the power of this new medium to influence important industry decisions. Fact 15. The welfare queen counter-narrative. Claudine was deliberately created as a direct response to the growing political narrative about so-called welfare queens that was already beginning to emerge in American politics during the early 1970s, years before Ronald Reagan would make this stereotype a central part of his presidential campaigns. The filmmakers were deeply concerned about how single black mothers receiving government assistance were being portrayed in media and political discussions as lazy, dishonest people who were taking advantage of the system rather than working hard to support their families. This harmful stereotype suggested that women on welfare were living luxurious lifestyles at taxpayer expense, driving expensive cars, and deliberately having more children to increase their government benefits, which was completely contrary to the reality that most welfare recipients were experiencing. The writers and producers of Claudine wanted to show audiences what life was actually like for a single mother trying to raise 6 children on inadequate government assistance while also working a job that she had to hide from welfare investigators. The film went to great lengths to demonstrate that Claudine was neither lazy nor dishonest, but rather a hard-working woman who was trapped in an impossible situation by a welfare system that penalized her for trying to improve her circumstances. The movie showed how she struggled to provide basic necessities for her children, how she worked as a housekeeper for very low wages, and how the threat of losing her benefits created constant stress and fear in her daily life. By presenting Claudine as a fully realized human being with hopes, dreams, and genuine love for her children, the film challenged audiences to see welfare recipients as real people deserving of compassion and respect, rather than as political symbols to be criticized or blamed for larger social problems. The timing of this counter-narrative was particularly important, as it came just before welfare reform would become a major political issue that would reshape American social policy for decades to come.